There are three questions that the committee asks of every nominee. So I'm going to ask each of you to just respond briefly with just a yes or a no. And when after I read the question, I'll start with you, Mr. Taub, and then we'll just go down and move as quickly as we can. First, is there anything you are aware of in your background that might present a conflict of interest with the duties of the office to which you have been nominated?
No.
No.
No. No.
Second, do you know of anything personal or otherwise that would in any way prevent you from fully and honorably discharging the responsibilities of the office for which you have been nominated?
No.
No.
No. No.
And lastly, do you agree without reservation or to comply with any request or summons to appear and testify before any duly constituted committee of the U.S. Congress if you are confirmed?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Taub, the Postal Regulatory Commission plays a critical role in conducting oversight of the Postal Service, as you've talked about and I mentioned in my opening comments. Things including prices, on-time delivery service, and whether the Postal Service is providing prompt, reliable, and efficient service to every single community all across the country. For example, the PRC recently began a public inquiry to seek more transparency on proposed changes to the postal network. The PRC's oversight work here is absolutely essential. We must ensure that any Postal Service changes will not have any negative impact on the services that they provide and the customers that they serve. My question to you, are you committed to ensuring the Commission acts as a strong regulator, including taking proactive action on these emerging issues? And if confirmed, how are you going to work to this goal? If you could talk about that for the committee, we'd appreciate it.
You got it, Chairman. That task of providing transparency and accountability to the United States Postal Service is the key mission of why the Postal Regulatory Commission exists and was created. I had an opportunity as a lead House staffer to help craft the 2006 law that transformed the Postal Rate Commission, which was a relatively weak rate recommending body, into the Postal Regulatory Commission. So I have a deep familiarity with the goals and expectations that the task before the Commission, recognizing that the Postal Service is 100% part of the federal government. It isn't quasi-private, quasi-government, or quasi-anything. It is 100% part of the federal government, operating with not one but two statutory monopolies over letters and mailboxes with a huge amount of captive customers. So the public interest role that the Commission plays is vital to ensuring the public interest is met. The Commission, as you noted, has proactively stepped forward to undertake a inquiry as to the Delivery for America plan. This is the most far-reaching plan that is being implemented as we speak. If one listens to some of the Postal Service information on this, it may be the most fundamental change to the network since Ben Franklin was Postmaster General. And so this is not a time for the Commission to think big thoughts or step back. We've got to be using our authorities, recognizing we're the regulator, not the operator, to ensure the American public has transparency and accountability, and that's exactly what we're doing with that public inquiry you mentioned.
Judge Jones-Boger, as a magistrate judge, you have a direct experience with a high volume of cases that are now facing the D.C. Superior Court. So my question for you, ma'am, is how have you learned to manage your caseload efficiently while also ensuring that everyone who comes before you gets a meaningful opportunity to be heard? And how will you use that experience in this new position?
Serving as a magistrate judge for the past 7 years, I've been assigned to each of the 5 divisions at Superior Court. I ensure that I am prepared. That means being familiar with any Supreme Court guidance and precedent. I do ensure that the litigants have their opportunity to be heard. I am respectful when I am on the bench. I preside over each matter with a level of humility and respect the dignity of the litigants. With respect to the attorneys, I do make sure that they are prepared and they understand my expectation as not to cause delay. It's very important for the court to reach timely resolutions. So I set expectations out early in ensuring that if there are any barriers that might cause delay, that it's addressed at the outset. If there are any continuances that are requested, I don't make wholesale decisions. I make sure that there really is good cause or excusable neglect to warrant such a continuance. In the various matters that I presided over where the majority of the litigants are pro se, I do ensure that I speak clearly, try not to use legalese so that they can understand my ruling and ultimately, of course, become compliant and to follow through on the court's orders. Superior Court fortunately also has a wealth of resources within the courthouse and also within the community. So in instances where there are additional services needed and or legal questions that as a judge I cannot answer, I'm always willing to direct the pro se litigants to those resources. And if confirmed, I will continue to preside over my matters in the same way.
Thank you. Mr. Nguyen and Mr. Okocha, you both have extensive experience trying cases in D.C. As prosecutors. So my question for both of you, what challenges do you anticipate facing as you shift from your role of an advocate to the role of an impartial adjudicator? And how are you preparing to make this transition if confirmed? Mr. New, we'll start with you. Or Mr. Nguyen, I'm sorry, Mr.
Yes, Senator Peters. So fortunately for me, I've had to make this transition one other time in my career after practicing law for 3 years at WilmerHale as a defense attorney working on complex financial matters. I then became a law clerk for the Honorable Reggie B. Walton. And as an attorney at WilmerHale, my job was to be a zealous advocate for my clients. My job was to look at the facts and look at the law and then always ask myself what's in the best interest of my client. As a law clerk, I essentially sat in the shoes of the judge, and I had to be neutral and fair-minded and ensure that all the parties, through their written submissions, had a full and fair opportunity to be considered and to be heard. And I think my ability to make that transition back earlier in my career, I was able to do that by bringing a sense of humility to the role. And I think humility is important because humility means recognizing that you're not necessarily the smartest person in the room. It means recognizing that you may not have all the answers to all the problems that come before the court. And it certainly means understanding that just because you've always done something one way doesn't mean it's the right way. And I think if you ask my friends, colleagues, and opposing counsel, they'll tell you that I've always brought a sense of humility to the work that I've done and that I'm somebody who always leans on the perspective of others to help inform me on what the right decision is. And I expect that if I'm confirmed, that I will rely on that experience when I made that transition from defense attorney to law clerk and bring a sense of humility to the bench so that I can make that transition from being an advocate to being a neutral arbiter.
Thank you. Mr. Okocha?
Yes, Senator, I would agree with my co-nominee that humility is important. I'd also add that it's important to network with those who have gone before you. I have a number of colleagues who used to work at the U.S. Attorney's Office who do work at D.C. Superior Court. If I were confirmed, I would talk to them about their experience and learn more from them as well. Thank you.
Mr. Taub, the Postal Regulatory Commission is responsible for regulating postage rates or prices, as you well know. In 2020, the PRC adopted rules to modify the rate system, but since then, the Postal Service has repeatedly raised rates, taking advantage of its authorities under that system. But this is concerning for certainly many customers and constituents of mine. So my question for you is, what are you currently doing on the PRC to monitor how these changes are affecting affordability and service for the average customer? And if confirmed, what would you do to focus on affordability and examine the entire rate system?
That is one of the key objectives that the law lays out for the market-dominant rate-setting system, the price cap-based system that you described. There's 9 somewhat conflicting objectives in law that the system must achieve. And as you noted, at the end of 2020, the Commission, after an extensive review of notice and comment, revised that system, kept a CPI-based price cap system, but went back and tried to recognize where we identified deficiencies. We are fully committed to not waiting, as the 2006 law mandated, a decade, but within just a couple years, we are going to do another full comprehensive review. Are these 9 objectives of law being met? Affordability, as you mentioned, is one of them. Financial sustainability is another. High-performing service standards. There's 9 that must be met. We're going to balance all that. Get the experience. We put in place the rules at the end of 2020. The Postal Service first implemented those changes about a year later in 2021, 2022. So right now, we only have about a year or so. How much of this is driven by CPI? Certainly, well over half of those increases are CPI itself. The Postal Service, since the 2006 law, could implement rate changes more than once a year. They had not chosen to do that, so there's nothing in our rules of 2020 that modified that. But we are concerned. We're looking at it. One of the other aspects, trying to get ahead of the curve and not wait for this review to start in 2 years, we just opened a proceeding to look at, are there ways to incorporate in that CPI price cap system a mechanism to recognize when service is not being achieved and maybe ratchet back the rate authority if service isn't achieved. It's an open docket. We're getting comment. But again, one of those things that rather than wait for this more comprehensive review, we're planning now and looking at it.
Thank you. Mr. Traub, the PRC is an independent agency, and as a strong regulator, must certainly maintain sufficient independence from the Postal Service. The PRC's budget is, of course, a very important part of that. And the Postal Service Reform Act has made changes giving the PRC more budget flexibility so that it can regulate the Postal Service even during times of a government shutdown, which hopefully we won't have, but we always have to be prepared. These provisions were meant to maintain the PRC's independence and ensure strong oversight. My question for you is, if confirmed, how would you work to ensure that the PRC maintains full independence, understanding that obviously the Postal Service also plays a role in respecting that independence, but how do you intend to maintain that?
In terms of the budget process, I've got somewhat of a unique perspective, having served as chairman of the commission for more than 6 years. From 1970, when we were created, until the 2006 law, we got our budget directly from the Postal Service. The 9 President-appointed, Senate-confirmed governors could only modify the bottom line amount by unanimous written decision. That process worked well for 38 years, but in the 2006 law, the commission was put into the appropriation process. As chairman, I can tell you that was a disaster for the stability and viability of the commission. We were deferring investments in staff and IT. More than 90% of our budget is just for staff, salaries, and rent. So thanks to you and your colleagues, last year's reform bill reverted back to that process that worked well since 1970. We're in the 2nd year of that right now. Last year, the governors did not modify the budget that we put forward. We're talking about a budget of $20 million out of the Postal Service fund of $78 billion, a small amount to recognize the important task we have, and we were digging out of a hole that we no longer flatlined. We are going through that process the 2nd time. The governors are new, folks who hadn't been at the service before that, and so more to follow. But I would observe we're in the previous process that had existed. We did not have a Postmaster General who was openly stating there was no need for a postal regulator and that it should be abolished. I'm unaware that the 9 governors, either collectively or individually, have publicly disavowed that perspective. And so while they review our budget right now, and again, the law would require all 9 in writing to modify that amount, we are in a bit of a different ecosystem than existed before. And so we need to stay in communication with you all to make sure the commission has the resources to do its job.